It's 6 p.m., so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here. Just to tell you the lay of the land, we have 4 board members in person. We're kind of leaned over in this way. We have 4 board members that are calling in for various reasons. They are unable to attend in person, and we have one that's actually on vacation and couldn't call in. So just so you know, there's Josh, Dave, Amber, and Jeff are all on the phone, I believe. Cindy, is that correct? Okay. Let's go ahead and get started with the call to order and the Pledge of Allegiance, and the flag is back there on the left. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now you all understand the delay that occurs when we have people on the phone. So, item 2 is approval of the agenda. We have one addition to the agenda. It's at your table side. It's the waiver of years of experience and appointment of Bruce Hanson. And I would recommend that becomes 6C, and then all the other ones just get relabeled D, E, F so that they're in order. Any other additions or corrections to the agenda that anybody sees? If not, I would take a motion and a second to approve it.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of the 6C.
Okay, we have a motion by Cynthia. Do we have a second? Second by Bill. Any further questions? Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Let's move on to item 3, which is approval of the minutes. The July 11th minutes are on electronic pages 2 through 5. Are there any corrections or additions to the July 11th minutes? Hearing none, can I get a motion and a second to approve the July 11th minutes? Moved by Bill, seconded by Cynthia. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 3B, it says the July 18th meeting minutes on electronic pages 6 and 7. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, do we have a motion and a second? Or a motion by Joel, do we have a second? Second by Cynthia. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. Let's move on to public comments. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to convene into the public comment period of our meeting. Although state law does not require us to hold a public comment period, we have chosen to do so because we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our community members about their concerns and issues. Having said that, please note that the board is here to listen. The public comment period is not designed to be a discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect the board to respond to the concerns and questions now. This is because we take your concerns and questions seriously and want to have sufficient time to process and research issues if need be. We will, however, respond to your questions and concerns at a future meeting or have the proper staff get back to you at the appropriate time. The board will now entertain public comments. Each individual speaker is allotted up to 3 minutes. Individual time limits will be enforced because we do have a fairly lengthy agenda. I only have one blue card. Mr. Barta, you're up. Thank you.
We're going to pick this up, I guess, where we left off because the public comments that were made last year weren't heard. So on May 3rd of 2022, Mrs. Schaub served as the meeting chair for the Policy Review Committee. During that time, FDI and FDI-AR were discussed, and I have some questions and concerns. It says that you compared the GFPS policy and admin regulations to West Fargo Public Schools policy and admin regulations. I don't understand why we'd put that straw man out there. It's silly. Both came from North Dakota School Board Association, which came from the National School Board Association. So we're comparing apples to apples. And really, what was the metric we're comparing for? Hey, are they doing it? Yeah, they're doing it, so let's go ahead and continue to do it here. I expect decisions to be made in support of our children. my children. Some of you up there don't have children, so you're making decisions for a group of individuals you have no stake in, except a paid position. That's disappointing. But the discussion was held about the notification of parents and the reasons why or why not to notify parents. Who are you? Your job is to educate, not raise my children. I raise my children. So let's get out of that lane and get into your lane, because your lane needs a lot of help as far as educating goes. I'm very disappointed in you, sir, but I'm going to stop there. You went out and you requested a legal opinion, Ms. Schaub. So what is it? I'd like to see it. Can we get that in the notes? Because I'd like to see that legal opinion. You say the committee did not feel the suggested policy that I provided that kept males out of female locker rooms and females out of males' locker rooms. You said it was not in the best interests of the students. What was your metric for that? What measurement did you use to identify what the best interests of the students are? Because I can tell you that my child doesn't even like taking showers after football practice because he's there with other men. Now you throw a woman in there. Or worse, the ladies are in there after volleyball practice and in walks a guy with everything hanging out. So what metric did you use? I'd like to know, because it's concerning to me. There's some other words I'd like to say, but I'm not going to say them. On May 16th, 2022, again, Ms. Schaub had another meeting of the Policy Review Committee, and you discussed FDIAR. And the discussion was held about balancing the students' rights to privacy and FERPA disclosure. FERPA was designed for parents to obtain documentation that the school is holding about their children, not designed to keep you from divulging issues my student has in the schools that you don't think I need to know about. You're not the parent. Board. So let's get off it and realize that you're out of your lane. You're out of your swim lane. I raise my children, not you.
Please wrap it up, sir.
I appreciate it, sir. Please don't interrupt until my 3 minutes are done.
Your 3 minutes
So the
are
right
up.
to privacy against parents? My child's right to privacy against me knowing what's going on is good for the student. I'm not even going to be able to get to my next topic, but you say you may need to be prepared to provide accommodation for both the transgender student and the student who may find offenses in the presence of a transgender student.
Please wrap it up. You're over your time. Thank you.
Apologize, sir. The answer's quick. Less than 2% of the population fall into the transgender society, right? 80 to 95% of those, numbers I've given you already, sir, revert back to their original gender once they get out of the silliness of puberty and social media. But you're condemning them right now to a life where they regret their future life and they try committing suicide, most of them from the ages of 24 to 36. Please, listen to the parents for once. Thank you very much.
Let's move on to item 5, which is superintendent's recommendations for discussion. 5A is review of the school board meeting norms on page 8. Bill?
Yes, be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public, speak up when the norms are not being followed, advocate and on behalf of the students and keep the community in mind.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 5B, which is guaranteed energy savings contract update on electronic pages 9 and 10. And then I believe the team has a presentation they're going to give us. Brandon, are you kicking this off?
Yes, thank you,
you.
Dr. One. Members of the board, I'd like to introduce our guests here. Dave Bergeron's with ICS Consultants. He's the principal of the company. Jason Splett, he's a project development manager with the company. And Connor Daly, who's with CMTA, is a partner company in this project. Just a quick reminder and preface before I hand it over to these guys to make the presentation is that November 22, 2021, school board selected ICS Consultants to provide the energy savings performance services for the district. They began their work immediately, and they're here today to provide an update around that. You're going to hear a little bit of scope of what they've discovered so far and 4 different opportunities, different options that the board can pursue. Today won't be a decision on those 4. They'll come back later with some more definitive numbers. But the last thing I wanted to point out, just as noted in the memo, is there's a number of projects taking place across the district. That's District 1 and District 140. And just wanted to clarify that this work is similar to other projects. There's a table provided as an attachment just to kind of show a few of the large ones. It even includes a guaranteed energy savings program out at the Air Force Base at District 140. So it might be confusing. These guys are the right guys to answer all your questions, though. So I'll hand it over to Jason Splett to bring us through our presentation.
Yeah, thank you, folks. Thanks for having us. As Brandon said, we're just going to give you an update of where we're at within the process. So we've spent, since last November, really diving in, understanding your utility costs, analyzing, 4+ years of utility data so that we can really understand how your district facilities are operating and, where there's some room to capture some savings within them. So we're going to walk through, what is energy savings performance contracting. We're going to give you a little bit of an update on the benchmarking, so the utility data that we grabbed. We're going to go through the options that we are currently in design on, and then just talk a little bit about the next steps over the next few months of our process. So with that right away here, I'm going to turn it over to Connor to talk a little bit about performance contracting.
Thank you. So as Jason mentioned, we've spent about since November of last year going through the utilities and the design process to really leverage the different utility energy savings that we believe we can find through our discoveries at each of your facilities with operations and maintenance savings as well, to fund the best project for the district to really address the best needs at each facility, where that goes into deferred maintenance needs, HVAC needs, controls needs, and things like that nature. The slide shown here shows a sample project that we've done with a different district in the past. And what this really shows is that utility benchmarking that we'll go into after this is that top orange line. And that is gathered directly from your utility bills. And as Jason mentioned, that is averaged over currently 4 years of actual utility information that we have gathered for each facility. So that sets your baseline. That's what we base everything off of for the entirety of the project and into our contracts. But then through our design process, we're doing calculations on what we believe our renovations and our upgrades will actually be able to save. That goes into that blue line, your guarantee. And in that contract, that is a number that we actually do guarantee. So if we do not meet that, we will reimburse you for whatever is missed. But the green line is also gathered from your actual utility bills post-project. And as you can see, and it is typically, and we have never missed a guarantee in our history, it is always below that blue line. But it comes directly from utility bills. There's no hidden information there. We're going directly to those bills, reading them month to month, and making sure that everything that we do is actually meeting what we say it should do. So then kind of digging into the that top line a bit, that benchmarking, that orange line. As I've mentioned, we've gone through 4 years of utility data, gathered their actual bills, entered these in, and averaged those out to see what each facility really looks like on a typical year's basis. So as you can see here, this is really just looking at overall spend at each facility in the district, averaged out over those 4 years. This includes your gas, your electric, your water, and your sewer. Pretty standard from what we would expect here. Your largest schools, Red River and Central, are at the top. Largest square footage typically means the largest energy usage as well, biggest expenditure. So we want to focus there a lot, so we did, but that is expected. A couple of schools like South Middle School definitely stood out to us as being a little bit higher of $1 per square foot. We put a little bit more effort into that when we do our investigations. And then as you go down, pretty much everything kind of lines out the same way. The bigger schools have more expenditure, so we kind of focus on the areas where we think we can save the most money and get the most benefit for the district. This pie chart really just breaks down your overall yearly spend into what utilities that really breaks down into. So you can see that your electric utility is where you spend the most money, so that's where we want to focus the most of our time. and effort into designing things around your electric utility to save money there and save utility dollars. Natural gas follows. Those are your two biggest expenditures in any school when it comes to heating and cooling your school, ventilation. So that's where we want to focus the most of our time. This is still averaged out over the 4 years. This is a whole district view, but that breaks it down into the individual utilities. So then we want to kind of show where you should expect things to go over time. So your this slide shows your electric utility escalation rate is what we want to call it. So over time, you can only expect utility rates to increase. So over the past, since 2008 to 2021, your utilities have increased on an average of 4% per year. So to show that in a better sense, we have this graph pulled together as an example. We used the actual utility usage for Central High School, and then showed what the rates look like over the past 15, 20 years with the 3 different electric rates that you currently have present in the schools in your district right now. So as you can see, it only really goes up. There are a couple dips here and there, but your overall average is going to be to increase, and we do not expect that to really change anytime in the future. Next, going into your next biggest utility would be gas. So again, this one on average over the past 15 years has increased on 3% on average per year. Gas gets a little bit more difficult because there is a large portion of that cost that is based on the market value of the gas. But that makes these projects honestly more valuable because it kind of diminishes the impact that you're getting from whatever the market may do. If the market cost goes up, any energy that we save is just worth more money, more savings to you. And if the market value goes down, then we're still saving money. That difference goes down, but you're still saving money over what you would have spent. And really the point of these 2 slides is to show that big green sentence there at the bottom, that any energy saved today really is just worth more to you in the future. And that's what this escalation is really important to kind of dig into and why we want to show it.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the different scope options. So right now, the team is currently in design on the 4 different options, as well as the district-wide scope shown over on the right. So, Connor made a comment about, South Middle School kind of standing out. Since that time, the team has been watching South Middle School operate. And as soon as we get further into the process here, we're able to remotely kind of change things and really get that to be more of an efficient building. So that's an example of some of the controls commissioning. So we'll walk through each of the different scope options just so you can kind of understand it maybe a little bit better and where we're going. So starting at the top there, district-wide scope lighting, so LED lighting throughout all of your buildings. Building envelope improvements, so your doors, your sweeps, maybe some spray foam, some of those things, and then controls commissioning, so that South Middle School is a good example of that. Lake Agassiz, steam to hot water conversion, we'll talk a little bit more about that one. Red River High School fluid cooler winterization. Winship Elementary School controls upgrades, so that's project will really just enhance the work that the district did about 7 years ago when they redid the HVAC systems within there. And then the big option here is that Viking Elementary School and going through doing that full renovation. So we'll show a little bit more detail on that, but option 1 here is 100% funded from savings. It's about a $5.6 million scope, goes through 14 of your facilities and has 1 full HVAC renovation. So I tried to break it down just into a little bit of a snapshot, just so hopefully it was a little bit easier to understand. So here is Viking and the existing condition. So you can see over on the left, that's your lower level. You have a steam boiler plant with steam air handling units. If you look on the right there where it's blown up a little bit, you're all steam and there's no air conditioning throughout that facility. When we looked at the proposed solution to this is replacing that steam plant with a hot water and getting new ventilation throughout the facility with air conditioning. Looking at it, it's called an Induction Displacement ventilation system, and you guys aren't going to probably know what that is, but it is a very efficient system going in that has reduced amount of maintenance just because it's got less moving parts. So it's a very good system that is going to be long lasting for Grand Forks schools. So, and when we looked at all these options. I know you guys, your board here, your priorities are indoor air quality and getting air conditioning within some of those facilities. And really, that's what we're trying to capture here is get you guys a system that is going to be long-lasting for generations to come within your district. So, so again, Viking, hot water, and new ventilation with air conditioning. When we look at Lake Agassiz, currently you have a steam supply from the University of North Dakota, and you have some piping control issues on the different air handling units. I think you guys have taken some tours of that facility and maybe heard some of the whistling or some of those things that they've experienced over there. So proposed scope in this facility is to replace the steam with a district-owned hot water boiler plant, and then go through and fix or correct the control issues and minimize that noise that you guys are experiencing there. So comes with a fairly good energy savings as this portion. So option 2 has everything that we've already talked about, and then we add Kelly Elementary School into that mix, and really looking at doing that classroom full renovation. So it's the classroom wing within that school. So $9 million scope. You got about $4.3 million in capital cost avoidance, which is your building fund that Brandon kind of talked about at the intro to the meeting here. So 14 facilities, and you have the 2 HVAC renovations. So I apologize, this one gets a little bit confusing just because there's so many different systems within there. I think one of the important things is the areas in yellow that we are showing currently have air conditioning, and your classroom wing on kind of plan north here does not. It's got unit ventilators, and it is a hot water boiler plant that is a little bit aged. So as we look at going through here, really getting the entire building provided with air conditioning in that classroom wing, doing the induction displacement so you have that good long-lasting ventilation, a new hot water plant, and then we are planning for an alternate on the gymnasium for ventilation improvements within there. And the purpose of that is just so that we have some more options along when we get to bid day. So it's getting fully designed. It just gives you guys more flexibility in the future. So option 3, everything that we talked about, we add Lewis and Clark to the mix. Total scope is about $11.8 million. You have $7.6 in capital cost avoidance going through all 14 of those facilities, and you have 3 full HVAC projects being completed. So again, looking at just kind of that simple map, you have the steam boiler system with steam ventilation throughout, and as we look at the proposed solution, you'll have a new hot water boiler plant with air conditioning and new induction ventilation throughout the building. So really kind of capitalizing on those priorities that you guys have. So option 4, we add Wilder to the list here. Total project is about 13.2. You have 9.3 million in capital cost avoidance. You have the 14 facilities and then 4 full HVAC renovations. So when we look at that, Wilder does have a hot water plant, but its ventilation systems aren't meeting indoor air quality. So when we look at the proposed solution, we'll come in with hot water air handling, with new ventilation with air conditioning. The one thing, it's kind of hard to see on this screen, I apologize, but at Wilder, we are going to bid the gym within the base bid just because there's no other place for those kids to go. It's their gym, it's their lunchroom, it's all of those things. So, Connor, talk about this.
Yeah, so these next couple slides really are just to be a quick viewpoint of where the state of affairs almost is for all of your mechanical systems across the district. So we call these our green, yellow, red charts. Obviously green being the best, red being the worst, yellow is intermediate. And these colors are really just based upon industry standard life expectancies of the types of equipment you have in these systems. So green obviously means good, red means past the end of useful life, yellow typically means it's within 5 years of that useful life. Now, I want to be clear that green doesn't necessarily mean that that piece of equipment will not break tomorrow and need to be repaired, but it is highly unlikely that that will happen. And it takes a lot less maintenance dollars today to upkeep a piece of green equipment. Whereas a piece of red equipment is highly likely to break any day, it's going to cost a lot more, and the potential of even having parts to go back and replace and fix a piece of red equipment might not even be an option. So that's really what these color differentiations are. But this first chart really is just showing you an overall view of your HVAC, your controls, systems as they sit today. This is what you look like. Then when we go to this next chart, it's really just looking 5 years in the future. If you did nothing, if you spent no money on any of these, you let deferred maintenance continue to grow, what will these systems look like in 5 years' time? You lose a lot of that yellow, you lose a lot of the green, and a lot of red pops up. This is just a lot of heavy maintenance dollars that are going into the budget at this point to keep systems running, let alone keeping the indoor air quality, ventilation, all of that at a good standard for your students. Then we go to this last graph, which is really just showing what the impact 5 years from today will look like with all of the projects that we have proposed, as well as other projects the district has going on at the moment. So you lose a lot of that red, you gain a lot more green, you gain a lot, you lose a lot of that deferred maintenance that is on the plate today and will be gained in that time frame. And you're also gaining systems that you didn't have before. So previously, 2 slides really quick, there's a lot of gray in that second column, that central cooling plant. So that's all of the cooling that you don't have today. Whereas you look at this, and there's really only a couple schools at this point that don't really have that central cooling. And just as a caveat to that as well, those schools might have some cooling today, but you're losing a lot of that no cooling and getting a lot more cooling in all of these schools. So that's something, a situation like this past summer, where schools have to be shut down in the summer for a day or two due to excessive heat, won't really be as big of an issue moving forward. So we'll pass it over to Dave for the schedule.
Thanks, Connor. So what you should expect going forward is we're still in design on all the options. Doesn't mean you need to do all the options, but we're designing all those options. And then in August and September, we're going to go out and solicit contractor bids on those designed options. So in August and September, we'll be able to come back to the district with hard numbers on that contractors are actually taking off of a design. And we'll bring multiple contractors to the table to ensure that we have the right numbers in place. And I don't have to tell you today, it's a pretty rough market out there for taking numbers. That's why you're gonna have some ability to move some of these options around a little bit as we move forward based on contractor numbers. We have started to put together draft contracts so that we can get legal review, your district legal review on those contracts, so that once you have made a decision to move forward, we're not then going through a legal review, because it's going to become imperative as we look at doing these improvements that we can start ordering equipment almost immediately once you've made a decision. The lead times on mechanical equipment are pretty extended today. So you'll see November through May procuring all the material needed, and then construction split into 2 different summers. It's a pretty big project depending on your choice. Across a number of buildings. So we've split it up into two summers to be able to make the needed changes that you select. Jason?
All right, that is all we have for you folks. So just wanted to give you an update just so you guys kind of have a understanding of where we're at. Any questions?
Brandon, did you have any comments before we open it up for questions from board members?
No, thank you.
Why don't we start with the people in Never Never Land? And this is going to be kind of clunky because we got 4 of you out there. So if somebody has a question, just say, I have a question, and tell me who you are. they either understand really well or we lost them, one of the two. So we can come back to them. About the three of you. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, my question is, you stated that we're going to do this over 2 summers. Do you get secured bids for the second summer, or do you wait on that, hoping that prices may go down?
Ideally, we will get bids for it all at once, because that'll help us with the guarantee. You know, we got to lock into that now so that, you know, we can move forward with the whole project and know what that total energy savings is going to be over the course of time. So,
Would we have the right to reject if we see a bid at a school that's way out of line, can we have that ability within this project to reject that bid and then come back and bid it at a later time?
yes, you have we bring all the options to you, we bring all the pricing to you, we review it beforehand, and we will have those conversations with you guys. Ultimately, you guys make the decisions, and we calculate the energy savings based on your decisions so that we can come to a solid project that you want to move forward with.
Other board member questions? Cynthia, go ahead.
I'm a little reluctant to ask my questions because I think that they're pretty naive, but here goes. So the steam heat. So UND provides that steam heat. Is it just for Lake Agassiz at this point? Is that the only school?
Yes, currently, UND is only supplying Lake Agassiz, yes.
So the schools that you talked about switching to the hot water heating, hot water
Boiler plant.
boiler plants. So let's just take Lake Agassiz. Right now, it's UND steam heat. So UND takes care of that, the maintenance costs. So, I don't know. So I'm wondering if my question is, I'm wondering if there's some cost savings, in quotation marks, because UND houses that, and then does the district take on those costs to maintain that hot water? If that's at all a good question.
I think Dr. Brenner has an answer for you.
No, that's a fair question, and we're finding that the steam heat is costing us more to facilitate that building than probably the alternative. And we're also finding that we're incurring more costs underground, in and around the building, even out to the street level, that could be borne by somebody else, but we're taking care of that right now. So that's a fair question. It would be a better situation for us to own our own plant.
Yeah, and that's what our calculations have shown. Yep.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
And, so the other one is really just very anecdotal. The other day, I was at a meeting with the district, the Park District, and the Grand Forks Housing Authority, and the county. I'm missing somebody. The city. And walking through South Middle School, the cafetorium was a whole lot cooler than the room that we were at. Is that what you're talking about when you've talked about that? I don't have the words that you use, that second category up there on that screen?
Yes, the controls commissioning.
Yes.
That could be some of it. You know, I think a lot of it with the controls commissioning is just making sure the building is operated as the way it was designed. So that could be an example of something that was out of whack. It was overcooling within that cafeteria, which is obviously costing you energy. So that's where, you know, we've been monitoring that system since last November, just to see what it's doing and see where we can go in and fix things. And the nice thing about that is, you know, we're not going in replacing systems. We're tweaking the controls and kind of like the programming of how it actually works. So it's low dollar improvements that hopefully will have big impact in energy savings.
Joel, you have any questions or thoughts? No. Okay. Does anybody online have any questions or thoughts before I jump into mine? I just have two quick ones. Brandon, I'm wondering if maybe you or Cindy or somebody could send out these slides to all the board members, just because we didn't have a chance. And even when I had 2015 vision 40 years ago, I couldn't have read all that from back there. So it just gives us a little time to do that. You know, this is a big business nowadays. You know, it wasn't, I don't think, 30, 40 years ago. My simple question is, okay, say we do school X, Y, and Z. When do we have to do it again? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Or, because I mean, things change, things improve, systems improve. How often do you see buildings kind of looked at again saying, because, you know, I mean, I look at Discovery, which is a new building, but it's already, I don't know, 6, 7 years old, and I suspect things are starting to wear down. I mean, I'm a physician, so I know the human body starts degrading right after birth. Same thing with buildings and stuff. So how often do you see that?
I think, typically it's about 20 years you start looking at the different things. I think one of the key things that I want to point out with the induction displacement systems that we are looking at installing is there are very few moving parts within them. So there's less to go wrong. There's less to break. There's less to maintain. So, that was one thing that Chris was really wanting to go for, was getting those systems, just because they're going to be long-lasting systems for you that you probably won't have to come back to 20 years. You can get out to 30 years or more with them.
And then just one other, go ahead.
Well, but you are very correct. There are certain systems, lighting systems, in the last 20 years, we're probably on the third generation of technology that reduces energy, and you don't really even have to replace the equipment. There's lifetime stuff on LED today. Control systems tend to have a quicker life. For what we're seeing for folks who have done this 15 years ago, when that debt expires, they start to look at it again, and what's the technology at that time. But Jason's right on as well. The larger mechanical equipment will have a 25 to 30 year life cycle. So hopefully that answers.
My wife always complained to me that when the light bulb started to burn out, I said, let's go buy a different house, because I didn't want to do even changing light bulbs. I don't think that was quite true, but she used to tease me on that. The one other question I had is I see a lot of red at post completion, both at Schrader and Valley, and I'm assuming Valley is because we're anticipating that we'll have the community support us in a new Valley. But a lot of red at Schrader still, and I know that's one of our areas. Is that something, and maybe Brandon can jump in, is that something that we'll have to be looking at outside of this scope of other things? Because we got so many other different types of projects going on. I just worry a little bit, because Schrader is aging. You talk about South, but I mean, South is a brand new baby compared to some of these other buildings.
Okay. Yeah, so currently we don't have a full HVAC plan for Schrader. I think as we have been going through this process, it just, with the energy savings that we're seeing, it just doesn't fit within this particular project. Not saying that we're not going to go in and do some things in the short term with our commissioning and some of those to try to improve it, but I think that's something that needs to be looked at in a different way.
Yeah, I would just reiterate the importance of this board. I think you guys have had a lot more conversations about that than where I've been at the table, but it's of the utmost importance. And even on that, green, yellow, red chart, you probably saw even a darker shade of red on Valley Middle School. It's just showing just where that facility's at.
Well, Bill and I are red-green colorblind, so we didn't see any red or green. We saw some yellow, but any other board members at the table have questions? Anybody online have any further questions? Dr. Brenner, you have any questions or thoughts, comments?
It's perhaps a clarifying thought and a question at the same time, just so we're all on the same page. When we talk about energy savings, guaranteed savings, I kind of liken it to when you go to the doctor, there's a $25 copay, your insurance is going to pay so much, and then sometimes you have to pay out of pocket. So if you could just explain, for example, like option one, there's a energy savings cost, doesn't hit our general fund, but within these options, 1, 2, 3, and 4, maybe just so the board fully understands that there is a cost, that would come out of our building fund to make sure that we can get through these projects.
Yeah, so when we look at option one, I did pull it up here, it is 100% funded from savings. So in this scope, we have 5.6 million in energy over time that will pay for the project. As we go to option two, the total scope is 9.1 million. We have some of that, a majority of that, for about half of it funded, a little less than half funded with energy savings. And then there is that 4.3 million in capital cost avoidance that is a part of the building fund that you had referenced. So we don't have enough energy to pay for the entire scope of the projects. And, a large portion of that is, your priorities are really looking at air conditioning, and those typically consume more energy than what you have now. So that's kind of why it steps up the way it does.
Thank you for that, Jason.
Well, and also to add one quick thing, kind of going back to the green, yellow, and red as well, is that the most efficient piece of equipment is a piece of equipment that does not work or is turned off. So some of those red pieces of equipment might not even run today. So if it's not running, there's no energy going through it. So if we go back and replace it with a brand new high efficiency system, for the most part, the building is still going to save energy, but for spaces and for some of these other facilities that we end up adding in, the energy savings might actually go up. You might not be saving energy by adding these systems back in because you're putting a system that's actually running now in place of something that wasn't even ventilating your school in the past.
Brandon, do you have any final thoughts? And maybe one of those could be, when will we potentially see these gentlemen back?
Yeah, the only final thought I would offer to this too is that you could see, the final, if you were to select all of these, would be the greatest project scope of 13.2 million. And you're looking at then a contribution from the building fund of 9.3 million. If you look at the balance of the building fund, which we'll talk about, you'll say, where's that going to come from? This is over 15 years. And that's where the savings estimates are. So what we do is we bond that money, we finance it. We bring it forward so we can start to accrue those savings on day one, and then we'll pay it back with all the dollars we've saved through our utility bills. So that's the concept on how we would do the pay for there. I apologize. The second?
When do we get to see these brilliant faces again?
Yeah, the final slide, I think Dave brought us home a little bit, and just a little bit later, August or start of September is when you'll be bidding?
Yeah, we're going to be bidding end of September into a little bit of October. So I would expect that we'll be back in front of you probably in October with, some hard contractor numbers.
Well, we got high expectations, so. Well, I thank you all three for being here, and I'm assuming if board members have questions, they can channel it through Brandon. If we have questions that day, I'm sure you'll be more than happy to answer for us, so appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good evening. Let's move on to item 6, which is superintendent's recommendations for action. 6A is the consent agenda on electronic pages 11 through 22. Can I get a motion and a second for the consent agenda? We have a motion by Bill. Do we have a second? Second by Joel. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Opposed, say, opposed, say no. Thank you. Did I see somebody's hand back up there? No, okay, sorry, I just thought, it's probably just some flares coming from my eyes, so. Let's move on to item 6B, which is waivers of years of experience and appointment of Janitha Ladrillo, on electronic page 23, Dr. Brenner.
Just a point of clarification and a note of apology to the board. If I could take you to page 6 in the special meeting minutes of your packet, I want to point something out to all of you. Page 6, right-hand column, waiver of years of experience and appointment of Janitha Ladrillo. You've already taken care of this appointment, so she's scooted in 2 consecutive board meetings, so you don't need to take any action on this one.
Thank you. Well, let's quickly move on to item 6C, which is waiver of years of experience and the appointment of Bruce Hanson, which was at your table side. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bruce Hanson's been offered the position of Social and Academic Intervention Learning formerly known as the STEP program, as a teacher. And so, given the language in the negotiated agreement, it gives the superintendent the authority to bring to the board to waive those years of experience. Mr. Hansen brings in 17 years of experience. We would ask the board for that approval. He'd be placed at $63,154. That's a BA plus 45, step 18. Thank you.
Any clarifying questions for Dr. Brenner? If not, can we get a motion to approve that waiver? Motion by Cynthia, do we have a second? Second by Bill. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to item 6D, which is Finance Committee Report, Consideration of Preliminary Budget and Tax Levy for Fiscal Year 2023, electronic pages 24 through 35. Mr. Palmasino.
Yes, the Finance Committee did meet with Brandon, and we went over the preliminary budget and the tax levy for fiscal year 23. And at this time, I'm going to just turn it over to Brandon, that he will give a presentation. And then if there's any comments from the Finance Committee, we can take them after the presentation. And then if there's any questions. So, Brandon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity. Just a quick note here, too, in the memo kind of lays out a little bit of what we are addressing here tonight. It does include the actual, what's referring to the budget here, that's the Public School District Budget and Tax Levy Certificate of Levy. So that is the actual document that it would be asked for your consideration tonight that would be expected to the county auditor's office. What I'm going to point most of the attention to, and I'm happy to answer questions on the document as well, is the screen just behind you. So it'll be a little bit of walking us through the elements and the characteristics of this budget. So if you need to move, it's a good time. So just the agenda for the presentation here. This is the same presentation that was provided to the Finance Committee. I did get some feedback from the Finance Committee, just kind of articulating a little bit more interest in wanting to even understand the mill rate and some of the other components here and how we compare to peer districts. So I've included a little bit more. Otherwise, it's the same agenda. First, walking through and just reviewing the actual budget process as far as timeline. Reviewing where we start with this is the guiding change document is approved by the board. We're going to review some of the assumptions around revenue and expenditures and just how that plays into a little bit longer term picture of 5 years. Again, the document we're considering tonight is really just this year's budget, but we take the long-term perspective into that. We'll be discussing both the implication for the general fund balance goal that we've set for ourselves of having 15% by 2026, and also the building fund, as these are closely related. And then really what that's doing to address our deferred maintenance and facility needs is the conversation we just discussed. So in the budget process, it really starts much earlier than this, but formally coming to the Finance Committee July 25th, as mentioned, and the minutes are attached. What this is positioning for is your review tonight of the document attached and needing to get that to the county auditor as a preliminary budget on or by August 10th. Then that gives us an opportunity to really solicit any of your feedback, work with others to continually nuance this budget, especially as more numbers come in. We've talked about that before too, how not all the numbers are firm yet, so this is why it's called a preliminary budget as prescribed by state law, and we really set our final budget October 10th. And so you'll see here, this will come back in front of Finance Committee in late September, and then to the board, actually on the day in which it's due. It's okay, I checked with the county auditor, and as long as we get it sent over by midnight, we should be in the clear. So this document is worth reviewing. This is not a document that I was lucky enough to be a part of crafting, but I do, and the entire business office looks to it for direction, and so it's worth starting here. Just to work through a few of these current realities and really the why behind all of this. So addressing that buildings are not optimal for teaching and learning, and the facilities are inadequate and not up to current building code ADA compliance, or meeting other federal requirements. Facilities need to exceed current funding, the current needs are exceeding current funding. And we've been most recently using general fund dollars to address that imbalance within the financing side. There's a need to optimize the number of buildings and employees on a per student needs basis. And when you look at this comparison with peer communities, it's noted that Grand Forks Public School systems are less than as far as mill levy and property taxes. So this does relate to a growing challenge of attracting and retaining adequate staff as well. When we get into the next column of the not how, the things we must not do, is where we set that guiding principle for this budget, and our entire district is not to let that ending fund balance, the ending general fund balance at the end of the fiscal year, June 30 any year, drop below those metrics. So by 6/30/2022, we shouldn't see it drop below 7%. And then we set out a couple more thresholds the following 2 years, and then in our next 2 years, which is our end game of 2026, at 10% and 15% respectively. And I'll relate to that information a little bit later in some tables and the actual numbers as well. We also can't violate laws. We will not address this with inequity, with student needs or services and programs. We will not eliminate key tenets of our strategic plan, underfund our facilities plans, or ignore available funding resources. So there's constraints on this, and you all well know that too. It's worth noting. And then in the far right column, there's a lot of good things that would come from this if we could start with these things. So I just wanted to provide that summary, and that's certainly where this budget got started. So working through some of the assumptions, I'm going to go through the revenue side and then also the expenditure side. So just to kind of also respond to the Finance Committee's interest in just some broader education, I'm going to ground it in some of our numbers in this budget. So we make assumptions on this preliminary budget because those numbers are not yet firm, as mentioned. So the three revenue sources primarily into our school district and all school districts are local, state, and federal. So starting with the local, which makes up about 24% of our total revenues, really what we work off of an assumption of is about a 3% growth. Now, Grand Forks is growing, which is very good news, and we're seeing that in the numbers, and you're probably seeing that in the skyline too. There's more construction activity out there. It's very good for all taxing entities, and we've seen where we were anticipating 3% growth within this category, we've seen a 4.29% increase, and that's for this budget. That's 22-23. We still go back to our more conservative assumption of 3% for those years, but I'm optimistic that that's going to be greater. Our next bucket of revenue is the state funding. This is the lion's share of the revenue at about 59%. And you'll see here too, we're operating with some conservative principles of only 1% growth in this revenue line item. The reason is, one, we know that this 22-23 number is going to be 1%. That's what was negotiated the last time all our state leaders met in Bismarck, and they do it every 2 years, so we are certain of this. And looking forward, we're still using just a 1% increase in that revenue line item, which is conservative. The 0.56 that you see there is just the budget's way of capturing some of the good work done by our administration and the state officials of adjusting the way that impact aid comes in. We have normally been, reduced our impact aid funding from the state because of the amount of impact aid we do bring in, which by definition that impact aid is meant to offset the property taxes foregone by the Grand Forks Air Force Base existence. The legislature has fixed this, so in 6 years, we won't even have to talk about that and its impact on state funding. It'll be made whole in 6 years, gradually increasing at $375,000 a year. So that's why we work in that assumption over 1%, but still no, that's really a conservative number from our perspective. The third bucket here is the federal line, and that's a smaller bucket at just 17%. We have tremendous resources coming into our district to help with a lot of different things. It's just sometimes difficult to time when they're going to come in and just how much they're going to grow by. So we've used a 3% annual increase, and I think even this year's numbers, it came in more favorably than that. So that's the assumption that works its way into the budget here. One note at the bottom, you'll see the special reserve fund. This is a fund that we can levy taxes for, but by definition, we really should not count on in our budget creation. Okay, I think maybe we were, because there had been some past practice. It's allowed by the state legislature that when you come up short, you can take half the balance of your special reserve fund, because it's there for reserves, and use it for appropriate uses. The trouble is you just can't count on it in your budgeting. And so we've taken that out of some of the assumptions that may have been talked about in years past. So I just wanted to point that out. That's to the around $600,000 that could impact. And to even translate that to our 15% balance goals, that's 0.5%. That's a measurable chunk of getting us towards our goals. Also requested just a little bit of information on the mill levy. This is the other half of it. There's that sheet starts with page 1, and it lines out exactly what we're requesting of the county auditor to count on for our request of mill levy. That's culminating in 111 mills for 22-23. That's up 10 mil because of the public referendum last year in September. Everything else is the same. The general fund is, as you understand and know, for all things essential for school district's budget, we can use those freely. The tuition fund at 4 mills is meant to offset and help pay for tuition-related expenses. Miscellaneous fund can be for a number of things, most often for technology, busing, or transportation types of services. Special reserve fund, like we just talked about, it's really a rainy day fund meant for allowable expenses when really needed. Building fund, we talk a lot about. That's the one that increased from 10 to 20 mills. And so we're excited to have that into the building fund budget and helping us address projects like we just discussed. And finally, the special assessment funds meant to help offset the expenses incurred when we're specially assessed for curb and gutter and things like that from the city of Grand Forks on our properties. All of those do add up to bringing in just under $30 million in a revenue line from the state. And that's because the taxable valuation at 253 is the total of our district, and it's growing. I anticipate the number to actually be closer to 270 for the final budget. So that'll help all these numbers more favorably. Just a little context here. When you look at our taxable valuation by community, because you may have comparisons with peer communities, is there's a lot of elements that really change how these dollars are brought in. So you can see we're kind of in the middle of the pack here with just a few chosen peer communities as far as total valuation of that district. So when there's more industry, there's more business, and there's more residences in those districts, you'll see that value go up, therefore increasing the value of each and every mill that you levy. And you can see then, you also have a choice on just how many mills you levy as a community. And so, again, we're pretty middle of the pack there, but you can see some communities really, there's a tolerance from the public to increase millage and taxation for investment into education. Just, again, context. And then this is that total amount number, the 29 or just under 30 million that our 111 mills derive. You can see the combination of a more valued district and the number of mills levied is really the combination that increases the bars. So that's where we get back at that guiding change document too. When we look at our peers, we have constrained resources, and we're trying to address all the same issues. And then lastly, just to make it understood here too, when you work out the equation and you say, okay, well, what does that actually cost on a home like what I own? You can see the same peer communities here across the x-axis, and the y-axis is really the taxed value annually on a said property. Two different bar charts here. They're not green or red, so I'm hoping we can see the shading. is that against a $100,000 valued home or a $200,000 valued home, and what that looks like. So in Grand Forks, I should have offered the actual numbers here, but you can see it's $500 annually on a $100,000 valued home. So about $1,000 on a $200,000 home over the course of the year. That's the current mill levy and taxation. So I added that in for a little bit of context, but I'll continue here, and you can stop me if there's any questions or save them to the end. Some assumptions on the expenditure side. With the salaries, we know what this year is going to be at 2.4% increase because that was negotiated at the last contract negotiations, so that's firm. As far as after that, we don't know. It's dependent on the conversation that takes place later in the year or start of next. And so right now, this budget is working in an assumption of a 4% increase in salaries. And that would be a similar assumption on any fringe benefits associated. Health insurance, full disclosure, this doesn't directly impact the general fund, but I thought it'd be of interest in that we were anticipating health insurance cost increase, like most businesses do, to the tune of even 9%. But when we made the switch to Blue Cross Blue Shield is where we've really realized a lot of savings in the health insurance. So we're actually looking at a reduction there. What we can do with that and what is being done with that, per your guidance, is we're then sharing in those savings with all the district employees who benefit from those health plans and replenishing our health insurance fund so it's even stronger for days forward. And then a couple other assumptions here, expenditure-wise, utilities. We're showing, we're anticipating a 5% increase. It's hard to know. Natural gas has certainly jumped up just recently. Electricity was up. Water, we actually saved a little. But we think that's a good number for a preliminary budget. And then other expenses, these are really a lot of your supply lines and those types of material items. You think about inflation and people talking about supply chain and things like that. We're showing almost a 10% increase in those line items. And again, we think that's conservative in anticipating what could increase there. A couple other things worth mentioning. This is something that took place prior to this budget but continues to impact future budgets, is that early retirement benefit has gone away. And as that phases out, you'll continue to see less burden on the general fund related to that. ESSER funds, as you well know, we're in ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, nearing the end of those federal funds, but they're going to continue to impact our budgets favorably this year and next year as those projects are slated to the tune of $9 million. Now that'll be offset because it's spent money, so $9 million bump in the revenue and a $9 million bump in the expenditure. So when they do come off, it'll normalize, but really they're almost considered separate from the budget because they're not replacing current activities. And one of those places where you'll see them show up is really construction services. So we're spending a little bit more and addressing our deferred maintenance just over the tune of $3 million, and it's because of largely those ESSER dollars. We're still in this budget working around the principle of expending $500,000 from the general fund towards the construction services, but then also using the building fund there too. So biggest thing is the ESSER dollars are going to really be helping us in these next 2 years. But we're holding true to that request from the board to only spend up to $500,000 from the general fund on construction projects. This was actually an attachment on your previous memo as well. It just meant to show you, all the good work that we do have coming. These are maybe a little out of order that I should mention, but if you look down midway through this chart, you'll see the Ben Franklin window replacement project and South boiler replacement, Phoenix boiler. These are projects that are done or underway. And so those investments are being made due to those ESSER dollars. Whereas we can see the district-wide life safety and air quality at the top, that's coming because of the public's investment in the school system by choosing to increase the millage that we could bond. The Lake Agassiz, just so we talked through these HVAC updates, guaranteed energy savings contract, again, we worked with a more conservative number here at 10 million, where if you heard them talk about it, they were just at about 9.1 million if you were to choose all options discussed. And then at the bottom, some of the bigger projects coming, like the Career Impact Academy in Valley Middle School, Greenfield, coming dependent on the public vote on the referendum. So it just gives you a flavor of that, when this school district and with your leadership, we're really making some impact here on our facilities. Another item or area that was discussed I wanted to include here, we're working through a variety of concepts around recruitment and retention of our talented folks in the district. And these are a few numbers around what this could mean to impact the budget. Most recently, we hadn't really set aside a budget around these things. The employee referral program had come in just as of last year. And prior to that, there's a small, $10,000 kind of budget for advertisement on more conventional stations, not just within our district channels. And you can see here, the administration is really trying to come up with some creative ways to address the challenges that we are facing when it comes to recruitment and retention. And so there's a lot of concepts here. These numbers are still being worked into the budget because they really have not been completely weighed in on. I just wanted to give you a sense of the effort that's being put in to try and understand and address that challenge. Only a couple slides left here, but this is really where you kind of get into the summary of the budget. You can see here, we'll start with the left column, and then I'll go to the right as we go through time. But quick summary on that far left side is, revenue, expenditures, and the difference thereof, and then where we started and where we're going to end. That's kind of the roadmap here. So first column, the fiscal year 21-22, that's the one we just wrapped up. So that's the budget as we set it out. We budgeted just over $113 million in both revenue and expenditure, actually showing that we anticipated a loss. So we budgeted for a loss in the year we just wrapped up. So naturally, you would see that it would take the general fund balance down just slightly. So what that means to our end goal of 15% of carryover is we budgeted for, planned on, really just 6.5% of our carryover. Now, conservative principles at play and a lot of good work elsewhere, we can actually see that these numbers came in a little differently here, both higher on both revenue and expenditures, but this time revenue beating out expenditure. So we've increased that. And the assumption I'm making here with the building fund contribution is addressed later in the final memo here, which I can further explain. But if we use the building fund to address some allowable costs that would otherwise be paid for from the general fund, we're going to meet our goal of just over 7% by the end of the 6/30/22, or the end of the last fiscal year. That really sets the stage for this budget here, where currently the preliminary budget has that revenue of just over $118 million, and the expenditures 117.4 or $5 million. So that difference is slightly stronger and increasing increasing our ending balance. This again is anticipating a slightly larger contribution from the building fund. The reason being is it's related to some of the way the ESSER dollars fall. But just know on the building fund contribution, as you can see it line out to the right there at $500,000, that's based on the guidance from the board of only using up to $500,000 general fund. And then you can see through the rest of the numbers here, we're working to improve the conditions to be successful and reach that 15% carryover by the end of 26. Currently, it's showing that we're a little shy. Now, I remind you of all the assumptions that were in play there. Only 1% increase from the state level. Same with the local, only 3%, not 4%. So there's a lot of, I think, things that will come out more favorably, and that's why I would characterize this budget as a more conservative approach. And then how this impacts the building fund. So as we talk about paying for some of those allowable expenses from the building fund rather than general fund, you can see here it's very similar pro forma. Revenue expenditure difference, beginning and ending. And then as we start from the left and go to the right, you can see where we ended up here. So the actual on that came out ahead, and then we were able to put together a stronger balance than we've seen recently at 2.5 million or so. And then as we go forward, in order to really afford the projects that we have in mind, it does show a slight dip of that ending fund balance of the building fund, but it does come back at the end of those 5 years. Worth noting, we don't have a policy set or a guiding principle on where we want this balance to be, a building fund. I think operatively we want it to address our building needs, so we need to grow that in order to do so. I also had checked with peer communities around the state, and it's really not common. There wasn't any evidence of other schools really having a set guideline for this fund like it has been with our general fund. But going towards 26, we want to grow that and continually address our deferred maintenance. There'll be decision points along the way as we have projects such as these that are presented and just where we want those resources to go. But this will change dramatically come 2028 when some previous bonding will mature. And so previous projects like Discovery or the auditoriums will come off of our finance obligations, and we'll see that grow. So all told, you know, this preliminary budget, it has us on a good course. I think it's conservative, and come October, the numbers will come in, and we'll be able to check how we're doing on our planning there. So with that, I certainly would stand for any questions, or Bill, if you have any further comments on behalf of the Finance Committee.
No, I think we've agreed at our meeting with the Finance Committee that this is a conservative budget, and we're working towards our goal of hitting that 15%, and I think we continue doing that. I think one thing we did talk a little bit with Brandon, that we need to put together a sheet that shows the general public what we've accomplished in the last 5 years, and it's nothing that you got to do tonight, Brandon. You know, tomorrow would be fine. No, I mean, down the road, so we have that sheet with us, so us as school board members, if somebody asks, well, what have you guys been doing? Here's what we've been doing, and we still have the projections of getting to that goal. So I guess at this time, Dr. Lund, I'll just open it, give it back to you for any questions from.
Maybe we can start with the other members, school board members of the Finance Committee, and that's you and Amber and Cynthia and Josh. Cynthia, did you have any comments you wanted to make?
Not particular, except that I noticed on page, and I didn't catch it till during this meeting, so I noticed on page 25, I believe, of the electronic copy, under the minutes of that meeting, number 2, I believe the hearing will be held September 26th, and our recommendation was to hold the public hearing right at 6. So I don't know, process for the placement of the public hearing on the agenda for the August 8th school board meeting. Did we mean September 26th? Or did you mean August 8th for this meeting? I don't know, I'm just.
I apologize, where in the minutes here?
Well, I don't, so when I can't find the 25 of 78, I just saw the page, sorry. And it's number 2, it's the minutes that Cindy took.
Mm-hmm.
Process for the placement of the public hearing on the agenda.
Yeah, that's what we talked about, having a public hearing at the start of the meeting and not to have to start the meeting and then end it for the public hearing. That on, when we have our public hearing with the general public, and that, what date is that, Brandon?
It's supposed to be September 26th,
That's
I
right.
believe.
Yeah.
That's correct, September 26th.
Yeah, and then at 6 o'clock, what we would do is have the public hearing, open the public hearing, open the meeting, then open the public meeting, close the public, or the public
Yeah.
comments, and then close that and go on.
And that's what we do every year,
Yeah.
so, okay.
So-
Amber, did you have any comments you wanted to make since you're on finance?
Look forward to in our vision casting is setting up some of these parameters and standards to meet for the building fund as well.
Thank you. Josh, did you have any comments?
Nope, that covers mine right there. Thank you.
Any further clarifying questions or comments from the two board members in the room that haven't spoken, which is Joel and I. I don't have any. Joel, did you have any clarifying questions or comments? No. Anybody else on the telephone have any clarifying questions or comments for Brandon or the group? Thank you. My only final comment would be, you said October 10th will be the day we have to certify the budget. We need to make sure we have a quorum on that day, because that's the one thing I could see that would goof us up if we didn't have a quorum to vote on it, because we've got a 6-hour window to get it certified between 6 p.m. and midnight.
Yeah, I think that's fair. In fact, I don't know past practice, but if we should anticipate bringing that to the board a little sooner for approval ahead of that, I could get back to you about even bringing it at a different date.
Yeah. I guess my appeal is more to the school board members. Look at your schedules, and if you have any chance of, if you think you're going to develop COVID on October 9th, please let me know. So, no, if you're going to have any scheduled vacations or things, just let us know. It shouldn't be an issue. I think we're also meeting early that day. Is that not Indigenous Peoples' Day? So we'll be meeting at 5 that day. So good. Thank you, Brandon. Oh, yeah, we need you guys, I suppose you want us to do a motion after all that, huh? Okay, so the recommendation from administration is to approve the preliminary budget and tax levy for 22-23.
And Dr. Lund, I apologize.
Yes.
Can we also then include setting that public hearing date for September 26th at 6 p.m.?
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second
Okay. Any final clarifying questions or comments? If not, the motion is to approve the preliminary budget and tax levy for 22-23, along with setting the date for the public hearing. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to item 6E, which is consideration to expend construction services against the building fund. Electronic pages 36 and 37. Brandon.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. Members of the board, we're in a good place where we can actually have to decide on how we want to do this year. This is not something that you've seen before. The balance of the budget, the building fund, has been stronger than in previous years, and that's for a couple different reasons. You previously had refinanced some bonds, which had brought in a little more revenue into this fund, and then furthermore, with the vote last September, the mill levy has increased, and that's been accruing all year long, ahead of tying that up with some bonding here that really starts in August. So all year long it's been accruing, plus the balance has been stronger. So we ended the fiscal year with a balance of about $3 million in that fund. At the same time, over the course of the year, we've been expending against construction projects, or expending construction projects against the general fund, more than $3 million. A lot of that ESSER, but still a sizable chunk of just over $1 million being expended on the general fund for construction-related services. And so the request here would be aligned with state code to be able to expend those against the building fund with board approval, and therefore improving our goals of growing that general fund balance and perfectly aligned with those allowable sources. And again, this worked its way into the pro forma and the presentation we just mentioned, so the impact of this is helping the general fund get to that 15% carryover balance, as well as maintaining the building fund at that stable level. So be happy to answer any questions here. Otherwise, the recommendation is to approve the attached expenses, and then we could account for that.
Clarifying questions for Brandon or the administrative team. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Just the very first line on page 37 of 78. Remove and replace glazing at Discovery around.
Yeah, I apologize. So I should have clarified what this list is here too. So there, if you pulled from our accounting system, you'd get a whole lot of projects, and these are not some of the big building projects that you'd hear about that normally at a board level. These are all works completed. These are all both completed last year and paid for last year. So they've completely closed out as a purchase order and a whole process. There's a variety of these projects that I couldn't articulate as clearly as Chris Arnold because I wasn't here for those and a part of the journey on those. The reason I came with this list is I started with the $1 million allowable expenses, and I basically found those that would fit our numerical parameter. So knowing that they all qualify for expenditure against the building fund, I took a sect of these and said, let's count those against that line item, against that fund.
And obviously, the computer cut it off after so
Yeah,
many
sorry.
letters, and it just, boom.
That's right.
Other clarifying questions or comments from board members in attendance?
I was just curious, just because Discovery is new, I just was curious as to what the second floor of Bill's knows.
Discovery has glazing on it to keep the sun from the windows.
It's the windows.
Oh.
Okay.
Yep, okay, yep, having been there, I get it. Thank you.
Any clarifying questions or comments from those that are on the telephone? Hearing none, the recommendation is to approve this list. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Joel. Do we have a second? Second by Dave Berger. Thank you. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to item 6F, which is consideration of DPI submission related to Career Impact Academy, electronic pages 38 through 78. Brandon.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. Members of the board, this is just a little bit of paperwork to make sure that we have the project completely aligned with what the state's expectations are. So as you recall, the Career Impact Academy has certainly come a long way. It's an exciting project, having raised a lot of dollars locally, and with that state match, we're in a position to really start on this project. And what we need to do that, North Dakota Department of Public Instruction requires that we complete a couple of different forms. For any construction project that's greater than $150,000, they require a form. For any project that uses federal dollars, in this case ESSER dollars, they require an additional form that they can pass up to their colleagues at the federal level. And lastly, for any project exceeding $350,000, they want to make sure we're bringing into context our entire school district needs. And so what they're requiring is that we complete a school facility plan. That's why there's so many pages that follow this memo, is because it's all of those documents. And with your permission, what we'd be asking to approve is all three of these attachments, and then myself and Dr. Lund could sign those, and we'd get those into the state, and they would approve those, and therefore not hold up our project at all once it comes time to really start the construction phase.
Clarifying questions for Brandon or the team?
Actually, I apologize, one clarification. Deep in those forms, there's a list of schools, and it provides some good information in general, when they were constructed, the amount of square footage, total kids, and capacity. And in the first document I had in your packet, I'd missed Lewis and Clark. And so that's included there now for the submission. It was built in 1952 with an expansion in 55, and so that detail will be included with the final submission.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions or comments from board members on the telephone? Any clarifying questions or comments from board members in person? Go ahead, Cynthia.
I'll just ask one. I saw in here somewhere that the anticipated growth in students was 70. Is that what we've been saying all along?
I believe that number came from our demographer's presentation in early May, and that's even over a 5-year picture.
So the recommendation is to approve this application. I'll entertain a motion for approving.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Cynthia. Do we have a second? Second by Bill. Okay. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. let's move on to 7A, announcements. I don't know if you've had a chance to read your Friday Focus, but in there was a discussion from Dr. Brenner about mentors and mentees, that we've assigned a mentor to each of the new 4 board members. So it's still a little nebulous as to how we're going to do it. We tried to put you guys beside each other, but I think that's a document that we will be developing as to what does that mean and what kinds of things can be done. And then I think what we will do is reevaluate at the end of the school year next year and say what worked, what didn't work, how do we want to tweak it and stuff. So I just wanted to point that out if you haven't seen that in Friday Focus. Dr. Brenner, did you have any announcements?
I have one announcement. This just came up in our cabinet conversation today. We know that there are going to be more appointments made before the school year starts. Our next board meeting is on August 22nd, which will be actually the week school starts. And we would like to schedule a Wednesday, August 17th, noon Zoom meeting, just to go over consent agenda items, basically allowing us to hire staff. In the past, we've always provided a letter of intent upon board approval, but it is Shark Tank between school districts right now. So if all of you could please put that on your calendars, Wednesday, August 17th, 12 noon. I promise it won't be more than 4 minutes long.
Other announcements? Catherine or Brenda, do you guys have announcements? Brenda?
Next week is our STEM camp at South Middle School, so we are so excited for that, Monday through Friday, and then Friday is our family day, so we are thrilled to have that.
Good. Thank you. Melissa, anything from GFEA? Okay, and then Dr. Brenner stole my other thunder. The next board meeting is actually now August 17th and not August 22nd, as I was going to say less than 60
Dr.
seconds
Lund?
ago. Yeah, go ahead, Amber.
I have a question about maybe an announcement, but teacher orientation. Before COVID, some of the board members would come and greet the new teachers, and there was a little breakfast. I'm not sure if that is going to happen or is being reignited this year, so just thought I'd ask the question.
Melissa?
What GFPA did last year, and actually it worked really well, so we're doing it again this year instead of holding a breakfast, because nobody wants to get up and be there at 7:30 in the morning. We work with Vital Nutrition here in town, and they come and make up a bunch of teas, and we greet the teachers and hand out a tea that they can take in and drink during the new teacher workshop that morning. So we're doing that on the first day, on the 16th.
Okay. Thank you. Board requests for future consideration. How about anybody on the telephone have any board requests for future consideration? Anyone in person have board requests for future consideration? Okay, let's move on to 7C, school board norms. Bill, how did we do? We did very well. Okay, thank you. And number 8, we are adjourned. Have a good evening. We'll all see or hear you on the 17th, hopefully, if not on the 22nd. Have a good evening, everyone.